When they come to Pennsylvania, they will have a new tool that we created last year, a rare disease caucus in Harrisburg, and I want to go briefly through some of the steps that we took, and it's definitely a we project last year, and it started with, let me see if I have this right. Yes. It started first with a group of volunteers, patient advocates who created, we never can do Rare Disease Day with the rest of the nation because our legislature doesn't meet at the end of February. So we'll always be following it in about a couple weeks. But for the past 3 years, a very, very dedicated group of volunteers has created a Rare Disease Day in Harrisburg. And as this group has gotten larger and continues to meet via conference call, I ran into them quite by accident when I was in the Capitol on their second Rare Disease Day. And my organization and my job at the organization of Life Sciences Pennsylvania is to advocate for the life sciences both in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. And when I came to the organization, it became quite clear we did not have the patient's voice at the table when we were doing our work. We had plenty of industry at the table. We had plenty of people support that need to have the industry, but we didn't have the end user, the patient. So in that work, we've really created this great group of rare disease advocates. And while we were talking, I brought up the idea of why don't we create a rare disease caucus? We already have a life sciences caucus in Harrisburg, which advocate for our issues. Why don't we do the same in the rare disease space? So I just want to go briefly over these quick steps. They're going to make a lot of sense, but I'll just put this out there that if you have a similar group of volunteers in your state capital, this is not a heavy lift, but I think it'll be an important tool from when it comes time to talk about some of the issues for this patient population. Initial steps, trying to figure out who in your legislature might be interested in rare diseases, is to look at their co-sponsor memos. There's always the Disease X Day in the Capitol. And at least in Harrisburg, they have to put that out there. It's all on their website. And I just spent a few hours going through. Now, we have 253 legislators in Harrisburg. We were founded by the Quakers, and so we're 2 or 3 are gathered. We form a government. And so we have the second largest legislature in the nation after New Hampshire. But after seeing all those memos, I then knew who I could reach out to and say, hey, we're going to have a meeting to talk about creating a rare disease caucus. Would you be interested? One caveat, just because a legislature puts something out does not mean that he or she is personally invested. They may have just been doing it because a constituent requested it or something like that. But in that research effort, you find a few really, really passionate legislators, and you invite them to a meeting where you can talk about what we want to do. And you'll find at least 1 or 2 that are really, really passionate. And Marcy Topol is the champion in Pennsylvania for the rare diseases. And the other thing you just need to do just to touch bases is just have those legislators talk to their leadership. Just say, hey, we're going to create this caucus. In Pennsylvania, all of our caucuses are informal. I mean, there's a cigar caucus. I heard about a bike caucus. We have one of those. But just to touch base with leadership. You probably also have to do their work for them. So draft the letter that they're going to put out to their colleagues to say, hey, come join this caucus. It doesn't have to be all that complicated, but just to make it easier for them, and then also have a deadline so that their offices will get back to the point legislator. And then figure out a vehicle to announce this new caucus. Now, we did it at our Rare Disease Day last year on March 16th, and here you can see a picture of a lot of our, the caucus actually grew while we were having this press conference, because literally legislators were saying, you need to be in this caucus, and we're pulling them up on stage or they're out in the audience. It was just like taking down names as they joined. But we had about 60 patient advocates there. I'll show you what the caucus looks like number-wise. The gentleman in the front there is Kyle Bryant. He is really the star of this volunteer committee. And he has Friedrich's ataxia, and he rides his trike almost 300 miles a day. And so you're talking about the personal story and how powerful it is. When he talks about how he was diagnosed at 17, and then what he's done, he raised over $1 million last year in bike races across our country. Anyway, love telling his story, and I think that's what resonates with legislators. So now you've created this caucus, what's the next step? Obviously, you need to have your initial meeting. You need to select caucus co-chairs, let them decide how they're going to do it. They are, after all, the legislators. Make sure it's bipartisan, bicameral. We've heard that. For places like Pennsylvania and probably most states, you got to make sure you have a little bit of your east or your west or your north or your south, depending on how your state is. For me, it always makes sure we have someone from Pittsburgh, somebody from Philly, someone from Harrisburg, those type of things. And then I would commend to you the NORD state report card, and using that as maybe your first document you give to these legislators so they can see how your state matches and mirrors the other states, and it really, really helps. And so our first result, and I thought it was kind of fitting that we had about 10% of our legislature join, since we always keep talking about that rare disease is 10%. So I was happy with 26, equally divided. We set the goals for the caucus, and the first one is to introduce this legislation for a rare disease task force, which will study the rare disease population in Pennsylvania over the next 2 years after it becomes law. It's not law yet, and that was Marcy Topol who did that. So again, it's not complicated. It takes a little time and effort, but I think. Any questions or anything in the back?
So if this is your first round going to advocacy or lobbying, and then you want to start a caucus, do you need almost like a representative to kind of tag team it or start a caucus, or you just kind of show up and start sending letters out?
Well, like I said, after you do your research, you can then send emails into the offices. And this is where my role really came in, because I'm a registered lobbyist, so these people see me almost every day. And the one thing I would tell you, as your group starts to form and talk, your volunteer group, you're going to find people with different skill sets. Like we had, our committee probably has around 12 people on it, and so they all had their own representatives who, of course, already knew them, so they approached them saying, I want you to come to this meeting. And then you also had, just like I said, people saying, like Marcy came out of nowhere, and just come to the meeting, and then there's some momentum that does start. So I think it's really working from your committee, identifying friends in the legislature, and then having that first initial meeting, and then having the recruitment. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
I want to highlight working with your life sciences organization at the state level, you can get them to do free work for you.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. We get our California Life Sciences organization to do free work for us all the time. They're great people to work with. They work with academia, hospitals, biotech companies, and patient organizations. And so, I try to get everyone to work for free. But, as much as you can leverage those people who already have the connections, I recommend you to reach out to them.
Yeah, we're the bio affiliate in Pennsylvania, so, yeah. Well, the bill that I just had on the screen is the first benefit, definitely. Second is a heightened awareness in Harrisburg about rare disease. Now, normally it's just a one-day, hit, on Rare Disease Day when we celebrate it. But now, I should tell you, Marcy Topol was just elected into the leadership of the House Republican Caucus, which is the majority. So now I have somebody in leadership who can then, when any other bill that we really want to start moving, I now have an advocate in that, it's not smoky anymore, but that small room where all the decisions are made. That's a benefit that we now have. I never personally had to work with her before until now. And little birdie told me she might become my legislator of the year next year. I don't know. She might get that award. Yeah. Yep. 239. It's a House bill, yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I do. I do. So, because I told you, it's my job at Life Sciences PA to bring the patient's voice. I just had a conference call with Kyle and his associate on the way down here. We're working on our Rare Disease Day in 2 weeks. But I will tell you, Marcy's staff has handled a lot. We just had a meeting last year with our Human Services Department to talk about this task force that they want to create, because of course there was immediate bureaucrat pushback. All the task force cost us around $50,000. Well, Governor Wolf just surprised all of them during his budget address when he said we're going to condense all the human services departments into one. So I don't even know if the people I was talking to are going to be there in a year. So having Marcy there is really, really key. So, but I do most of the work. Yeah, I send out the emails, I set up the meetings, but Marcy gets me the room in the Capitol where we're going to meet. We're going to serve lunch to all of our patient advocates in 2 weeks. She got us the huge conference room that's really easily, fortunately, very handicap accessible. Our Capitol was built in 1905, and I've never experienced more floor creases than when I was pushing Kyle during my first day with him. And I'd never noticed it, and all of a sudden, they were like valleys. It was a different experience.
And